you'll see the screen up there and say live, and it'll start showing the record.
I got you. Welcome to 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians. We are introducing the book this morning in this first hour. I always start with statistics for the book, and that's where we'll start with Thessalonians. This book has, as you see on your screen, 5 chapters, 87 verses, 1,837 words. And of course, every word of God is precious. There's not any of those words that we don't love. And then when you do the division on 5 chapters and 87 verses, it comes out to be just over 17 verses per chapter. So we'll be able to take a little more deliberate pace in this class than we are in some classes, especially Old Testament classes. You really have to go. But in this one, we'll be able to go a little more deliberately. You'll notice on your syllabus that we allow one class period for each chapter, and sometimes we allow a little bit more for like spillover time. So I think we'll be able to let you ask any questions you want to ask. I don't guarantee I'll know the answer to those questions, but we will discuss them, and I'll look them up if I don't. I want to start with, I'm going to give you this timeline at the top, and then we're going to go over to Acts and see the background for the book. I think that will help us to understand more of the content of the introduction than if we did not do that. But let's look at an overview of Paul's missionary journey. You have in Acts 16, beginning at verse 8, the Macedonian call. So he was traveling across Asia Minor. He wanted to go north into Bithynia, wanted to go into Asia to the south. The Spirit forbade him and said, just keep going. So he came to the ocean, and across that ocean was Europe. And that's where when he was here on the ocean, with the ocean between, that's where he received the Macedonian call. Macedonia is over here. It's in Europe. And come over and help us was the message. So Paul immediately got on a ship and headed that direction. And we'll see where he landed momentarily, but I want to go through the timeline first. So you see he had been forbidden to preach in Asia and Bithynia. Macedonian call, 2 days. He was able to reach Philippi. It's going to take them, I think, 5 days to go back. So the wind was in his sails. God was pushing him over that direction. You notice this dotted line here. So the gospel is going into Europe for the first time. Never has the gospel been preached in Europe until Paul gets there, so far as we know. Of course, Philippi is Acts 16, 15 through 34, and he's going to meet with Lydia first, and then he'll be put in jail, and he'll eventually, of course, convert his jailer after the earthquake and near suicide there. It's 100 miles from Philippi over to Thessalonica. So that was probably several days' journey to get there. Even riding an animal, couldn't ride on a boat that direction. So probably went overland on the Ignatian Trail or one of those ways. Anyway, he arrives in Thessalonica. That's chapter 17. That's what we're about to go read in Acts, but I'll go ahead and show from there. He's going to get chased out of Thessalonica pretty soon. He only gets to stay about 3 weeks, and that was not enough time for those new Christians really to be able to grow and ask all their questions and get acclimated. But the persecution ramped up so that they were going to murder Paul and Silas, so they have to leave. And they make their way 50 miles over to Berea, and their enemies eventually chase them over there to Berea, but he's able to preach there, Acts 17, 10, and 11. I got to preach in Berea last summer. We were over in this part of the world, Rome and Greece, and I sat in a outdoor garden, like a park, and preached on Acts 17. It was an amazing opportunity to be where Paul was. And
did they check to make sure the things that you were saying were so?
It was a good group. Yeah, I think they probably did. They had their Bibles, so that was good. So a few weeks, the same mob shows up and chases him again. He goes 141 miles over to Athens. You're still in Acts 17. And he did not have as great a success in Athens as he had in the previous 2 stops, or mixed results. He makes the journey 50 more miles over to Corinth, and then you're in Acts 18. And he's worn down and discouraged at this point. You remember, he prays to God, and God tells him he has much people in this city. And so he goes and preaches there. Even Corinth was a wicked city. You know, it'd be like sitting outside the city of Las Vegas and thinking, oh man, how am I ever going to convert these people? Except Corinth was probably worse. All right, let me show you a couple of maps, and then we'll go read the text. I'm going to just bring us up to speed here. This is Paul's first missionary journey, and we're in his second missionary journey, so we don't need to spend much time here. I just wanted to get you acclimated, remind you again where all this started and how the second one builds on top of the first one. So you see Antioch, and then out to Cyprus, Perga, around the 7 churches of Asia loop there, or some of the churches that are in Asia Minor. Now, the second map is of the second missionary journey, and that's where we are in Acts 17. So he's left Antioch again, Lystra, Derbe, he's retraced his steps, and then he's gone over to Troas, received the Macedonian call. He immediately gets on board a ship and crosses over, and he lands at the port Neapolis. And then he moves up to Philippi, and we just covered some of the things that happened there. And then when he's chased from Philippi, he goes down to Thessalonica. And that's where we are in the book of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. Of course, this is after he leaves the city, but he's writing back to those people that were converted on this missionary journey stop. Then Berea, then down to Athens, Corinth, and then Ephesus, Miletus at least here, Acts 20, and then back over to Caesarea where he finishes. So that's your map. I think I will cover... Well, while we're here, I'll just go ahead and do this. I'll skip that one, but just so you have it in your mind, this is the modern map. So you see Thessaloniki is still there, same location. It's a part of Greece today. And then you have Athens. We went to both of those places, attended a really interesting church service in Athens. They have 4 services every Sunday, and each one's in a different language. The English one, it was at 6 p.m. That's, of course, the one we attended. That was an amazing church. It was quite an interesting experience to go there and see the gospel in a different context. All right, that's all of that one. Then I'll show you the New Testament churches. So not everywhere Paul went, a church was established, right? Some places, yes, some places, no. But here there was a church established at Philippi, but not in Neapolis, where he first landed, which is just a little port outside the city of Philippi. Thessalonica, a church was established. Berea, a church was established. Athens, then Corinth, and Cenchrea, which was just outside of Corinth, and then back at Ephesus. So you sort of see a circle of churches around the Aegean Sea that were started on the missionary journey of Paul. All right, I think I will not try to cover that with you, although that is the bigger picture, and it has some of the stops and some of the details. But I'll just let you look at the color scheme to sort of get the lay of the land on how the gospel's gone from Judea, Palestine, and Syria, and then it's made its way through into the Roman Empire, and then ultimately it's crossed over into Europe at the point we are. Now let's go over to the book of Acts 17, and we will look at, we won't spend a long time here, but I just wanted to read this with you and give you a few notes just to sort of get the lay of the land for the background of the book. This chapter I call the Gospel in Europe, and it's AD 51. What I've done in the book of Acts, and if you want me to go through this with you at some point, I will. I've gone through every chapter and put beside the chapter number the year, and that's a very helpful tool. You probably could just find that online, but if you can, I'll be happy to take you through the book one day. But like chapter 16 is 50 AD, and then chapter 17 is 51 AD, and that's a helpful tool. Sometimes there's a big gap between one chapter and the next, and it helps to know that. The key verse of chapter 17 is 17:30. The key thought is from our section here, or just after it. Receive the word with readiness. And that's what I know all of us are doing as we, you signed up for a class that you're going to have to put a lot of time in and a good bit of work. So you're receiving the word with readiness. And that's what God intends for us to do, just like the Bereans in Acts 17:11. Now, I'll also give you the big picture here, but I won't take time to go through this. You see in the gutter between the columns of text there, I have drawn a line where he moves locations, like 1 through 9 is Thessalonica, and I color coordinated that so they're easy to tell. 1 through 9 is Thessalonica. Berea is 10 through 13, and then Athens 14 through all the way to the end of the chapter. So you've got those stops in this one chapter, 3 stops in Acts 17. And again, that's just something when you're reading through or you're studying, it's easy to find your breakpoints if you've got it marked like that. And so it's a good tool, a good study tool. All right, let's go into verse 1. Somebody read for us Acts 17:1, and I'll give you a few background notes as to distances from one place to the other. Nathan, how about you read Acts 17:1 for us? If you have it open there, please.
I have it open, yes, sir. Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and
Yes.
Apollonia,
Good.
they came to Thessalonica, where the synagogue of the Jews. And Paul, as his manner, was sent unto them, and the Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the scriptures, opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus whom I preach unto you is Christ.
All right, stop there. Let's discuss those verses for a few minutes. This is on the Ignatian Way, Amphipolis and Apollonia. So he's traveling one of those Roman roads, which it seems to me was providential when God set the stage for the gospel at Galatians 4:4. In the fullness of time, God sent forth His Son. The fullness of time, each world-ruling empire contributed something to the gospel, the world being ready for the gospel. So, you could go back and study Babylonia and Medo-Persia, Greece, but Rome contributed world peace, the Pax Romana, and the roads. So there were no pirates. At least there weren't widespread piracy. There was not widespread piracy as there had been before the Romans. So the gospel, Paul could get on a ship and get where he was going. And he could walk on these roads that were, some of these are still in existence. I walked on this one at Philippi a little ways, going down to it's beautiful. It's cobblestone, so it's a little rough, but that thing has lasted for 2,000 years. They would dig way down, like 4 feet or more, and then they would lay a substrata and then different materials up to the rocks at the top. So they've lasted for centuries. Anyway, that Ignatian Way is 535 miles long. It's 33 miles from Philippi to Amphipolis. And this is a city that is on both sides of a river. In fact, I think the name means both sides or two sides. I don't think I wrote that here. Then between Amphipolis and Apollonia, just 30 miles. But that would have been more than a day's journey in that time, especially because Paul had recently been stoned and left for dead. So he's probably not up to full speed yet. And he probably would have had to take it a little bit easier in making that journey, maybe stopping to rest occasionally till he got his strength back. Stoning was something you weren't supposed to survive. And he did survive it, but I no doubt there were some ramifications from that. He gets to Apollonia, which is 37 miles from Thessalonica. They know about where it was, but from what I can tell, they haven't discovered the city. It's an unknown location, but they know about about where it was. I didn't do a lot of research on that, but that was a note that I made. All right, Thessalonica is the capital of Macedonia. It had extra Roman privileges because of that. And it was named for Philip of Macedon's daughter. It was a commercial port. A lot of people passed through there. So it was a great location to have a church because they could spread the gospel more readily to other parts of the empire, because people would come to Thessalonica, stay there for a week or a month or a certain length of time while they were restocking or they were selling their goods, and then they would go back home. So that gave the Christians in Thessalonica an opportunity to meet with a lot of people and to talk about the gospel with them. I'll mention on this Roman privileges part briefly that's the card that the Jews are going to play. They're going to say that these men are teaching a king other than Caesar. And so if they can make that charge stick, then the people in Thessalonica are going to lose some of their privileges. They're going to be demoted. So that was a pretty powerful lever to use to get rid of Paul in the city, and because the people were very jealous of their Roman privileges. And then there was a synagogue of the Jews in Thessalonica. There was not a synagogue in Philippi. You remember Paul went down to the river and he preached to Lydia. He didn't have a synagogue to go to. Lydia was a practicing Jew, but she didn't have a synagogue. She just had an outdoor location, evidently, to say her prayers for her Sabbath observance. That gets us to verse 2, Paul's manner. I'll give you a sermon on that momentarily, but I wanted to see these big picture Paul's preaching style first. You could say that this is a 3-week gospel meeting. He preached for 3 Sabbath days in the synagogue in Thessalonica. We used to have 3-week gospel meetings, and not in my time, but before me. I've heard people talk about it, and I have preached in a 4-week gospel meeting, but it was a different speaker each week. I just preached 1 full week of that gospel meeting, which is pretty amazing. And I've done others that were a full week long, but that's the only one I've ever done that continued after I went on. Somebody else came in and preached. But here, Paul was preacher in all 3 weeks. So you see Paul's preaching style in these 2 verses. He reasoned, he opened the scriptures, he made his arguments from the Bible, alleging. So Paul's approach to preaching was intellectual. He was passionate, but these are all intellectual ideas. So that gives us some insight into how we ought to preach. Now, I don't believe that it's wrong to have different preaching styles. I think Peter probably preached differently than Paul, and you and I may preach differently, those of you who are preachers, and that I think God can use different styles to reach different people. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I do think that we ought to note Paul's style because it is endorsed by Scripture, and we ought to at least use it sometimes, or we ought to use an approach to it, part of it, in every lesson. We should include reasoning, we should open the Scriptures, and we should make our arguments or our points out of the Scriptures. And then I see verse 17, you see there on alleging, and we're not going to do that, but you can make a note to do that on your own. Now, I'll also notice before I give you that sermon that it mentions that this Jesus, that's his name. The Pharisees would have called him Jesus. That was his name. But they would not have called him Christ. They wouldn't have said Jesus Christ like we do. They would have only said Jesus of Nazareth because that's his name. They did not believe he was Christ because that's his title. So Paul is alleging that Jesus, whom I preach unto you, is Christ. He is the Messiah. I think that is sometimes lost on audiences today because we are in a different time in history and people are just used to those. They think of it like a first and last name, but it's not. It's like President Trump or President Biden. It's a title with a name. So I think that's all I'll give you on that. But let's move over I'll just give you this to you quickly. It's not directly related to Thessalonians, but Paul's habits, as his manner was, this text says. So his manner was to go to the synagogue, go where religious people were. They weren't his religion anymore. They were Jews. But he went there because that gave him a good opportunity to talk about Jesus with people that had a background in monotheism and in prophecy. So they were prepared, Galatians 3:26-27, to receive the gospel, more so than a pagan was. A pagan might be more eager for it, but the Jews were more ready for it. The second thing, he engaged in religious discussions. So we're seeing a pattern here for today. Not synagogues necessarily, but place where religious people are. And that can even be an online space. Number 3, he reasoned with others from the scriptures. So we ought to reason not from human reasoning, not from our own wisdom, but from the scriptures. Like this verse says, what do you think this verse means? So get people into the Bible. If they want to argue, let them argue with the Bible and not argue with us, because we don't matter, but the scriptures do. So get them. So tell me, what do you think the scripture means? And then, well, I don't agree with that scripture. Okay, but it's scripture, right? So realize that you're arguing with God if you don't agree with scripture. Then number 4, he preached the deity and resurrection of Christ. And we ought to do the same. I think that, there was a time when most people believed in the deity and the resurrection of Christ, but if I'm reading the situation right, people are moving away from that. Younger people are moving away from, well, I'm not really sure about that virgin birth thing. I'm not really sure he lived a whole lifetime and never sinned, maybe, but I don't know about that. So there's some doubt. And the resurrection, was it a bodily resurrection? Was it a metaphorical? So we need to emphasize this perhaps more than we have in our lifetime. Now, the next thing I'll notice is in verse 4 is the reception to the gospel in Thessalonica. Some of them believed, so that's good, and consorted with Paul and Silas. That's King James. What does your translation have if you're using a different one in verse 4? Consorted, or after it says some believed.
ESV says joined.
Joined, okay. Anybody else have a different one?
No, NASB says the same.
Mm-hmm. All right. I looked this up in the interlinear, and one of the choices was "were obedient." I really like that. You might want to study that more before you preach it and get your facts down cold. But joined is similar to King James, consorted, interacting with each other. But if it does include obedience in that word, then that gives us another passage, and this would not be the only one, of course, but gives us another passage that shows the kind of faith that the New Testament rewards, or that God rewards. It's not just a mental assent kind of faith, but an obedient faith, a submissive faith. And that might be another passage to use in those kind of sermons. Consorted with Paul and Silas, and of the devout Greeks, a great multitude. So these would be pagans or Gentiles, and the chief women, not a few. Those may have been Jewish. There's a synagogue there, and he's at a synagogue. So it seems that some of the Jews are believing, and maybe these chief women are a mixture of the two, but it's a mixed audience in that church from the get-go. Some Jews, some Gentiles. So you see the middle wall of partition has come down between the two groups, and now they are in the same location. Did I lose you? Are you there?
Yeah, we're still here.
You're still here.
All right. Well, I lost the picture on my end for some reason, but
sometimes you won't be able to see yourself, because as long as you see your screen, you're fine. We see you, Brother Al.
All right. I don't see you. So if you need to yawn or take a nap or anything, I won't see you for a while, I guess. That's okay. I gotta go. We still got 20 minutes. This is awesome. We'll finish this. Okay. So, devout Greeks. Now I made a note over here on the side, and I haven't really fleshed this out yet, so I'll just give it to you as an idea to think about. But you notice that the things that were the same on these believers and unbelievers, you got some of both here. They had the same speaker, Paul. They had the same message. They were in the same city. It was the same occasion. But there was a different culture, Jews and Greeks, and there were different responses. Some believed and some did not. So I think the same thing happens to us today. Those of you who preach, have you, I know you've had this experience. You preach the same sermon and somebody gets upset with you for preaching it. They didn't like it. Somebody else comes out and says that helped me so much. Or they may even respond to the gospel after the preaching of that sermon. It's not us. It's not the message. It's the receiver, the reception of the message. So our responsibility is not to pay too much attention to response and pay attention to accuracy of the word and to our attitude in presenting it. We can be caustic or, mean or shallow, some things that are not becoming of the gospel. And if we do that, then that's on us. But if somebody just gets mad with the message that we have presented in love, then that's on them and not on us. So you see an illustration of that here in this text also. So now we go down to the contrast. That's a hinge word, but a hinge word means that in this case, there's a contrast. But the Jews which believe not. So you see, I've underlined some of them believed in verse 4 and the Jews which believe not in verse 5. So that's the background of that chart. Moved with envy. They do not have the proper motive. They don't love souls. They don't love God. They don't love the word of God. They are envious because Paul is stealing their members. Some of their Jewish synagogue members are leaving the synagogue and going into the church. And they do not like that, which I guess is understandable. If you start having the same kind of success in your community and a couple of families leave a denominational church across the street or across town, then those leaders, if they do not receive the gospel also, are probably going to have a similar kind of response. They may not go as far with it as these Jews did, but they would not be happy with it. Now, I drew a line between Jews and lewd fellows. These are strange bedfellows, as that old saying goes. You wouldn't normally think that Jews who were supposed to ascribe to a religion of high morals and ethics would associate with lewd fellows of the baser sort. Those are the kind of guys that hang out at the bars, and they're not the kind of people that would cross paths very often with devout religious leaders. But in this case, somehow the religious leaders found them or knew them or had some kind of interactions with them, and they bring them in and they use them to accomplish a purpose of the baser sort, and gathered a company and set all the city on an uproar and assaulted the house of Jason. Jason is a new convert. He's one of those that believed up here in verse 4 and sought to bring them out to the people. That phrase, the people, refers to Jews. So they're bringing these new Christians down before a Jewish tribunal or a Jewish mob to try to use strong arm tactics to bring them back into the church, back into the synagogue and shut down this new religion, new for them in that city. Now that brings us down to verse 6. And when they found them not, that is, they were looking for Paul and Silas. So I drew the V there, those connectors back up, because that's the pronoun, and there's the antecedent up there in verse 4. When they found them not, they drew Jason and certain brethren. So they were able to find the converts, but not the preachers. The converts had hidden the preachers. We're going to see that momentarily. They wanted to protect them. So when they found them out, they drew Jason and certain brethren under the rulers of the city. saying, crying, these men have turned the world up, that have turned the world upside down have come hither also. All right. Now I made just a 2-word sermon right here. And sometimes you don't have to preach a long sermon to have an effective sermon, right? So here's the sermon. Are we turning the world upside down? And if not, why not? Why aren't we? Let's turn the world upside down. Let's get busy. Let's start making converts. And if people get upset with us, that probably means we're doing something right. Otherwise, we would not have gotten their attention. So we want to be people that turn the world upside down. That takes courage. That takes prayer. That takes the power of the word. That takes consistency in living and also in message. So that would be a different sermon to preach on how to turn the world upside down. But I made a note up here. I think I got this out of a commentary in verse 6. When they can't find Paul and Silas, then they attack Jason. And I got this quote somewhere. I liked it, though. If a bull cannot bore a man, then he will toss his cloak. If he can't get all that he wants and he's just mad enough, he's going to do something. And so that's the way that these Jews are. They can't actually get to Paul and Silas, but let's attack Jason. He's not quite the prize we wanted, but he's one of them. So let's attack him. Now verse 7. So this is a new convert, 3 weeks in. If he were converted at the very beginning, might only be a day or a week, but he's a brand new Christian and he is already being thrown to the wolves, but he handles it really well. Whom Jason hath received, so evidently Paul had been staying with Jason, and these all do contrary to the decrees of Caesar. I mentioned earlier, Thessalonica was supportive of Caesar. They were the capital, and they could lose privileges, saying there is another king, one Jesus, and they troubled the people. Those are the Jews, and the rulers of the city. Those would have been Gentiles, when they heard these things. So this message resonates with this Jewish/Gentile city. Both groups are now upset. Now Jason has to pay money to pay a fine. Security, verse 9, when they had taken security of Jason and of the other, they let them go. And then the brethren immediately sent away Paul and Silas by night to Berea, 60 miles south of Thessalonica, near Pella, and coming thither went into the synagogue. I love this. Paul is undaunted. What does the word undaunted mean?
He's not remotely concerned.
Yeah, he's not.
He's not worried about it.
He doesn't slow down a bit. He just got run out of one synagogue, but he doesn't stand outside the next synagogue and say, I don't know if I should do this again. Didn't end so well last time. No, he goes straight in there and starts over. He is undaunted. And he went directly into the synagogues. He did not go get situated first. He did not find a place to stay. He didn't, let's lay out a plan. Let's get a meal and talk about this. Nothing wrong with any of those things, but I just like how Paul is so zealous. He just, he gets there and he can't wait to get to the synagogue and start talking about Jesus again. And so he's evangelizing among his people first, to the Jew first, also to the Greek. So not only did the gospel go to the Jew first in the sense of the first few years of the gospel, from Acts 2 to Acts 10, those are Jews, or at least until Acts 8, and then the Samaritans halfway, and then to the Gentiles in chapter 10. Well, not only did that happen in the book of Acts as far as the gospel going out, but it also happened in cities where Paul went. He would go to the Jews first. He would go to the synagogue first, and then he would branch out to Gentiles also. But the Jews were especially prepared to receive the gospel. Therefore, that would be hopefully your richest fruit would come from them. All right, I think that's all I'll give you, unless you have any questions about Acts 17, 1 through 9. I just noticed one other note here, if you want this. 3 problems with the charges against Paul. This doesn't ring true at all when they said he's preaching another king. Jews were not champions of Caesar in the first place. You know, they didn't like Caesar. They were always plotting. You know, you don't have to read much into the book, the 89 chapters of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to see the zealots and the Jews, you know, attitude toward the Romans. So they're coming off as insincere here. Number 2, Paul was peaceably teaching. He wasn't creating any violent mob scenes. He just is reasoning and opening and alleging. That's peaceable. And then number 3, Christianity changes individuals by conversion, not society by revolution. So the gospel is no threat to Rome. In fact, the next time you preach on the conversion of Saul of Tarsus, you know, it's found 3 times in the book of Acts, Acts 9, Acts 22, Acts 26. Why 3 times? Well, it's not just for filler, you know, it's not unnecessary repetition. The 3 conversions give us different details for one thing, but historically or textually in Acts 9, you have the history when it actually happened chronologically and the details that related to his trip to Damascus and what happened on that trip. Then in Acts 22, he is talking about his conversion, and he is showing the Jews that Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism, not a threat to it. He's speaking to Hebrews in Acts 22. And then in Acts 26, he is showing to Festus and Agrippa that Christianity is no threat to the Roman Empire. It's not a political institution, and they will obey the laws of the empire. You know, so you have those 3 different purposes for having the 3 accounts of Paul, and you also see that here, and that's the reason I thought of it. Christianity changes individuals by conversion, not society revolution. He's no threat to the Roman government. All right, anybody have a question or a comment from Acts 17 about the background of the gospel going to Thessalonica?
Yes, Alan, can you
Oh, go
repeat?
ahead.
Can you repeat? I'm sorry. Can you repeat?
go ahead.
Can you repeat those 3 again? You said in Acts 22.
Yeah.
Yes.
In fact, I'll put it on the screen for you. I think I've got it at Acts 9. Also, I preached on this a couple of times recently. You probably could Google it and find it. I preached in Williamston, South Carolina, on the conversion of Saul, and I discussed those 3 chapters in that sermon. I also preached it last week in Nashville, Arkansas. I'm not sure I covered that point, but I did preach on the conversion of Saul of Tarsus. And this is the approach. You guys may want to preach this. This is not original to me, but I love it. I've adapted it. What Saul saw when he could not see. You ever preached that sermon? What Saul saw when he couldn't see. Those 3 days he was blind, he saw a lot, you know. But I can't give you that. But let me see if I can find that. 3, I think maybe it's here. Why 3 accounts? There you go. So you want to do a screenshot, a camera shot, or write that down, then it's on the screen there for you.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else have a question?
No, let me.
I didn't have a question. I had something put down though.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
With you had brought up the Jews working with those lewd men. My version says wicked men,
Okay.
but still the same. I put down John 15:18, where it says, Jesus says, if the world hates you, it hated me first.
Mm-hmm.
And then followed that up with Matthew 26:59 through 62, where Jesus faced the chief priests and the false witnesses, 2 men that should not work together.
That's a perfect parallel with this. The second
And then
one.
I put 1 Corinthians 11:1, where Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And so we talked about Paul being undaunted. Well, why is he? Well, he would, might look back to Jesus facing this and say, well, I'm on the right path.
Yeah. And that just reminded me of Jesus teaching, beware when all men speak well of you, right?
Mhm.
If everybody likes us, we're probably not doing something right.
My,
As
my
much as
da-
we want to be liked, but still,
my dad used to say all the time when we was talking to counseling parents, if your kids like you all the time, you're not doing your job.
Wow, that is a great statement. I preached on godly parenting recently in a lectureship. I wish I had known that. I guess I knew that, but I didn't think to say it. Wow, that's really good. I would have loved to have met your dad. I'd love to have known him. Okay, on this screen, I'm going to give you this because you need it, right? This is not related directly to Thessalonians, and I'm not going to go over it. But if Saul were saved on the road to Damascus, he did not know it. He was miserable for 72 hours. Ananias didn't know it. The Lord didn't know it. Go into the city, it will be told thee what thou must do. The Holy Spirit did not know it because he didn't record it. And Paul wrote 13 books and never said it, never said that he was saved by faith only, or anybody would be. So he was forgiven at the pool, not on the road. So I think that's a powerful, that could be a sermon all by itself, but it certainly is a good some sub points for that sermon. All right, now we're going back over to that. Unless somebody has something else, I'll be glad for you to speak. That makes the class better. But if
Brother Webster,
yes, go, Michael.
it's 10 o'clock. You got to go?
Is it really?
Yes, sir. It's 10 o'clock our time.
Wow, it sure is. On my iPad, it says 9:41. So I'm glad you said that. I don't know why I got stuck at 9:41. But anyway, I probably do have 5 minutes because they just finished chapel. So but I got to go. Time I get over there and get set up. But I'll just remind you during this hour, you're on your own time and you can talk amongst yourselves if you want to, but read through the books and find those two things: preaching ideas / things you've learned. And then the second one is questions that you have that you'd like to have answered in this class. And we may not discuss all. Well, I'll give you an opportunity to give a sampling of that, but I'm not going to let you go through all of them. But I do want you to save those lists. And then when we get to those places, if I don't bring out that point, for instance, that you learned in that verse, then I want you to chime in and say, well, what I see here is ... Or when we get to one of those words, phrases, verses, you say, what in the world does that mean? Then, ask about it. All right. Thank you. I'm going to disconnect and come back here in I'll be back over here in an hour. So if you do walk away from your computer, that's fine, but come back at 11 your time. Thank you.
So before y'all do that, I thought I'd come on and just give you a minute. If you had any questions about this semester or the next, or any questions about the school or where you're at or what you need to do or what I need to do, give a minute for you to ask that, and then I'll get out of the way. Nope, good enough. Okay.
Did
So,
you send?
I'm sorry?
Are there any books that you recommend for First and Second Thessalonians outside of what Alan has mentioned? In the syllabus, he only recommends the Bible.
Yeah, I've been debating whether or not I want to purchase a book for this. There's one by Truth for Today commentary, and I hadn't really decided. So I'll do that this week, and then it'd be for your library, not necessarily for the class, although it's certainly appropriate. And I like the Truth for Today commentaries. They're written by the Brotherhood, but sometimes I like to find commentaries that go a little beyond what our Brotherhood may write. And again, that's where you kind of, chew and swallow the meat, but spit out the bone kind of thing. So I haven't really come to a conclusion on that yet. So.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll get out of the way, and y'all go ahead and do your reading. And as mentioned, this will just keep recording. The reason is once if we actually go live to YouTube, And what that does is prevents us from having to put the recording here and then download it to our computer and then upload it to YouTube. That all takes time. If we go live to YouTube, it's all done for us. Now it goes live unlisted, so it's not public, it's not visible. I'll get you the link to the class so you can watch all the recordings. And you'll have access to it, but only those who have the link will have access. And so I'll get that done probably today or tomorrow. And I think there's a way that we can actually record it, and then pause. But then again, we have to, like I say, download the recording and then upload it to YouTube, and that takes time and effort. This is just easier. So, but these breaks will be recorded, but who cares? We can skip through them. So, Michael, when Alan comes back, he'll have to do the exact same thing. Okay, he'll need to quit. I'll try to be around if I can, but if you need me, come back on. Just send me a text or call. He'll need to quit the QuickTime player. All right, quit it, and then you can restart once his iPad is connected with the cable connected, right? A USB-C to USB-C cable connected to his desktop. Then he can restart the QuickTime player, go to the file drop down and see new recording. And then from there, there's another drop down where the little, you guys can do the same thing. You guys all have, most of you have QuickTime player. Well, I don't know if it's on a desktop or not. I think it is. But anyway, select his iPad from the drop down where you might normally record, which he's not going to record. Does that make sense? Really,
Yes,
step number one, make sure his iPad's connected to his desktop. Okay. Step number two is go ahead and quit the QuickTime. Make sure it's quit. And then step number three, restart. Step number four, from the file drop down, select new movie recording. And then from there, select his iPad, and his iPad is now visible. All he's doing is putting his iPad on his desktop so he can share his desktop. Then he's got to share the desktop.
Right. He's got to go to present.
Yeah, present after that. That's correct. Yeah. Just like we all do.
Okay.
I mean, any English do.
Yes.
All right. I'll get anyway. You guys enjoy it.
All right. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
There are 3 more for this class, but I don't know where they're at. So anyway.
you have the Calix and the Calix group and Ernest group coming over. Okay.
Yeah, Calix, Ernest, and Calix Dad Epi are supposed to be here, but I don't know if they forgot the timing or whatever. But I sent them a note. That's it.
All right.
Later. Bye. And you see, you notice in Michael, you see Alan Webster's on. You also see right now it's not backstage. Is his iPad is the other guys can't see it, but you should be able to see it. Where Alan Webster's iPad is just a blank screen.
Yeah, I'll put it on backstage.
Okay. Well, that's going to be what he's going to have to, drop out and redo. So.
Okay.
And I know he wants a view. This is the view with the power with his iPad on the right. That's the view that probably works best, and you can still see the students. I don't know why on his desktop. Yeah, it's a smaller window that may be a little harder for him. There are other windows where you can see the students like this, but or you could do something like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, he'll have to.
I don't think he knows how to. I don't think he knows how to expand the screen either yet. So I'll talk to him. I'll work with it.
Well, he might need one of his students there to help him expand the screen. Okay, rather than you try to talk him through it online, that's not going to work well. But if you have one,
I won't do it during class time.
All right, later.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, so we're off to reading, fellas, ladies.
All right.
You can put. What's up?
It's just
I'm saying all right.
everybody.
All right. Yeah, you can hit your stop your cam at the bottom, and that'll allow
Yeah,
you to be able to go. Yeah.
everybody make sure you hit mute too.
Calix, Calix, Calix.
So, sir, can you?
I can hear you now. We we're breaking for an hour, and we have an assignment. We need to read First and Second Thessalonians. Read all the chapters for this next hour and write down two two lists. One list is what did you learn about it, and then sermon ideas. And if you have any questions, when we come on the chapter, he's going to explain it. Okay. Can you hear me, Calix? You put your phone back on mute.
Can Can you hear me now, sir?
Yeah. So did you hear? You understand what we're supposed to do for the next hour?
We're gonna read First and Second Thessalonians, sir, right?
Right. And then write down two lists, what you learned, and then maybe some questions you may have concerning First and Second Thessalonians. Okay.
Okay, sir.
All right. You can go ahead and take yourself off camera.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Doing well.
Good. It's nice to get a chance to meet you. Where are you located?
Down in Clinton, Mississippi.
Clinton, Mississippi. Okay.
Down here with Dad.
Are you preaching?
Yes. In fact, it was funny. Alan was talking about the conversion of Paul. I actually did a lesson yesterday. What a blind man saw, part 1. Next Sunday, they're getting part 2.
It's a good sermon.
It is.
I've been preaching out of the Psalms forever now. One of the things that we talked about here with the men, we don't have an eldership, but they wanted to get work on the congregation becoming more spiritually minded. And I was like, well, if you want to be more spiritual, the Psalms are where you're going to find it.
Yes.
So
sir.
we've been teaching the Psalms and preaching out of the Psalms for about 6 months now. I'm done. I'm done. I told him, I said, starting in April, we got 2 more. We got one. Well, now we got 1, but at the time I said we got 2 more sermons and 2 more classes, and that's it. We're done with the Psalms. We're going to start in Corinthians.
Psalms is kind of like the Sermon on the Mount. There's so many gold nuggets and bars in there that you could preach forever and still not even touch the hem of the garment.
Oh, that's so true. I mean, I've skipped around so much and hit the main points and the more known ones, but I've slipped in an occasional gem that somebody might not have read. We're doing an in-depth look at the alphabet. That we're picking letters of the alphabet from Psalms. I'm learning a lot too. In 119, I'm learning a lot about the Hebrew alphabet and how those letters took on deeper meanings than just a letter. They had definitions, and we just did one out of Sade, 137 through 144. And that letter is actually a combination of Vav, Yod, and Nun, which has come to represent righteousness and faithfulness. So, it's kind of interesting. I'm almost done though. I only got 1 more sermon in the Psalms, Alan, and I'm done with the Psalms.
I hear you.
6 months worth of preaching and teaching out of it.
Man, that makes me happy. I love you fellas, ladies, to use what I give you. And I didn't even give you all that, but I got you. I'm going to take credit for inspiring you on it. Since the class started, that's where we started at, I think. So I got to figure out how to get back online.
Okay. All right. So what you need to do here on your iPad, I think, let me kick you off on your iPad and you can reconnect.
Okay. It should connect automatically, I think, shouldn't it? Let me see if it's connecting here.
Well, see if it's connecting and see if it picks back up.
I have a quick question while y'all are doing that. Is this heater that I've got going in my background, is that too loud? Can anybody? Is that disturbing or
I don't hear
distracting? Okay, good. Because it's freezing at this building, so I'm keeping it on.
Okay, yeah, you came back on. It must have connected again because you're back on the backstage.
So is my iPad visible to you?
Let me
I think I need to go to present.
Yep.
Share screen. Then
Is your
go
iPad
to-
connected?
Hello, Calix. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, sir.
Window.
Sir, he's talking to you, Alan.
Oh, good to see you. Alex, nice to meet you.
He's-
I can only do one thing at a time, so my mind is.
You're fine. You're fine. But he said, sir, so I knew he wasn't talking to me.
Oh, I think you're probably older than him, so he can give you a sir. I'm
Yeah.
trying to see if my iPad's on here, and I don't remember how to do that. So I don't
It's-
think it is. So
I
maybe I
think
need
you-
to start over
No.
somewhere.
No, I think you, because you're on the screen twice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did that work? No.
Let's see.
No. Oh, I remember. I got to go here. Yeah. Let's see if I can find Michael FaceTime first year. First year. Okay, I'm gonna have to kick myself out, I think, and start over because I believe that.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
because
that's
for
what Dave said.
you're gonna have to go back to QuickTime and all that again.
Yeah. So I'll quit it. And then
All right, he kicked himself completely out. All right, can you hear me?
yes.
All right, so did you go back into to QuickTime? Because you need to make sure you're connected back up.
Yeah, you're right. I gotta do that. So let me start over.
Keep jumping out. Sam, how many sermons did you get out of chapter 1? Samuel,
He's ignoring you.
No.
how many sermons you get out
2.
of chapter 1?
2.
2?
And then another one for chapter 3. And then I'm working on one for Second Thessalonians 3 right now.
You're just supposed to write ideas. You wasn't supposed to write the whole sermon out.
Oh,
That's the
well, I
teacher's.
may have
That's the teacher's pet. Don't you
I
remember?
may have wrote a whole entire sermon.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more to be added to it, but certainly thoughts of it.
That Samuel's an overachiever. He is.
He's the teacher's pet. You know that.
Yeah. Now that
Andreas is gone.
Andreas is gone. If you could speak in a Spanish accent, it would be more comfortable for us.
Well,
Yeah. All right, Brother Webster, you keep kicking yourself out.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I thought maybe it would I can't find my iPad on here, so I'm trying to get it to recognize.
So did you go back? Did you go back to QuickTime? Did you quit QuickTime?
I did. Then I
Okay, so
rebooted it.
Okay, and then you need to restart the QuickTime, and it should look under new recording. Your cable should connect up to your iPad.
Yeah, it's connected, but
And
it's not.
it should be
Oh, wait a
right in
minute.
your
Let me try
Dropbox.
my. Yeah, I did that, but it's not. Let me make sure I'm online. That could be the problem. Wi-Fi online. Okay. How did I get it to recognize that my iPad on my computer?
Restart.
I thought I just rebooted and it recognized it.
Yeah, quick. Do it again, and then and restart QuickTime.
Okay, I did that. Do I need to restart the presenter, the
No,
StreamYard?
not yet. No, you got to find your iPad on the QuickTime first. So go under after you restart it. Go under new. Look for the window of the new recording. You're not going to record, but you're going to look under that window.
Okay.
And you should see your iPad listed up as connected.
Okay.
Did you click on that?
Interesting.
Well, when I clicked on a new movie, it went to my StreamYard screen, and I clicked beside the record button, and it's not there.
No, don't record.
My iPad isn't listed. That's where I found it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So I'll get out of it again. I'll let you talk me through it. So I'll quit. I'm quitting QuickTime. Then I'm going back to QuickTime. So open QuickTime. And now what do I do?
You
go
should
to File, New Movie Recording.
Yes.
But that's going to take me straight back into StreamYard.
It shouldn't. You shouldn't click on it. It should give you it should show you your iPad is connected.
Oh, no. Well, I apologize that I'm not any better at this.
No, you're all right. Cause see, I don't have Mac. I don't have Mac. Dave does. I don't have Mac. Give me 1 second. Have you? Okay, so you did the QuickTime. You hit the QuickTime player again, right? And then you don't see the connection to the desktop under the new recording. You shouldn't have to click on it. It should recognize your iPad in a Dropbox.
I know it should, but it doesn't. So I don't know how to make it do it. So
okay,
that's how I did it before, but it's not showing up where it showed up before.
All right, is your cable's connected, right?
It is.
Well, I'm going to get Dave to help us out. Can we discuss our assignments? That way you can keep moving.
Yeah. Go ahead. That sounds like a good idea. I can work from an image if I could pull up an image. So I took a screenshot of the introduction. So let me see if I can
Well,
The the question I had from this is, I guess you might bring this out with the teaching, but it seems like they had a difficulty of the day to come as far as Judgment Day. And so that's kind of the question I had is, did they have that type of difficulty of not knowing when Judgment Day is coming, or facing teachers that were saying when Judgment Day was coming?
Oh yeah, definitely so. When we get to chapter 4, we'll look at that. But they were, some were dying, and they were like, they're going to miss the return of Christ because they didn't live long enough. So the day of the Lord, they didn't. And which you can understand with only 3 weeks to learn, that Paul didn't have time to cover everything with them. Like life after death and Hades and all those kind of things were probably not among the first things that he taught. So so they were inadequate in understanding on the day of the Lord, second coming, what happens after death, all those kind of things.
There's a pretty powerful lesson in that right there. So many times people are worried. I just don't know enough. That's why I haven't obeyed the gospel. Paul's main concern was getting them right with the Lord. The rest of that stuff can come in time. Those teachings and stuff can come over time. That's the whole purpose of the church, and helping one another out and stirring one another up to love and good works and all of those things.
Well, one of the things go ahead.
I think I will just go ahead and give you some of the easier introduction material without you seeing it on the screen. I'm a little frustrated about this, but I also don't want to waste our time. So let me give you an outline of the book. I think I can do that without you seeing it. I'll go a little slower than I would otherwise. So, we were working last quarter, and that worked really well. I'm sure the quality of the screen wasn't as good. So, but let me give you an outline. Chapter 1 is praise for the church. Chapter 2 is Paul's work in Thessalonica. He reviews what he did with them while he was there, chapter 2. Chapter 3 covers Timothy's visit. Mm-hmm. After Paul had to leave, he sent Timothy back because he knew they needed more instruction. He was concerned about them. So chapter 3 is Timothy's visit. Chapter 4, tell me if I'm going too fast. You want me to go back over something? So chapter 1, praise for the church.
No, and I got Dave. Dave is on the line too, Brother Allen. What's that? Brother Dominguez.
You're going to get me online?
He's online right now.
Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Okay. Hey, brother, talk me through how to get my computer to recognize my iPad again.
Okay, so
it is connected with a cord.
Okay, then have quit the QuickTime Player. Just quit it off your desktop. Make sure it quits.
All right, I have quit it, and now I will reopen it.
Yeah.
All right, it's open.
Okay, and now you should be able to go to the file up at the top and select new movie recording.
Okay. Right.
And
that pops up my StreamYard.
Right.
With a little red button.
Right, a window that you can now select.
It showed up.
Your iPad.
Yeah, now it showed up. So all we needed was Dave to come back, and it worked. So I did the same thing 4 times. It didn't show up. Now
I said the same thing. I'm glad it's
It's just
recorded.
Dave's got the magic voice. I don't know. My computer listens to Dave.
No, I don't see it yet. You haven't shared it yet, right? You have to share.
Oh, you don't see it?
Well, you have
Oh, I
to go
got to
to.
share it.
No, no.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to go to present,
All right.
screen, share screen, window, iPad. Now it should share. Anybody see it?
No.
No, they won't see it until either I or Michael, Big Mike will, but it's not shared yet.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there it is.
Is it? Okay, so good.
You're good.
Dave,
So everybody see it now?
I did exactly what you said. It's recorded. You got the magic touch. I don't know what, man. All right.
Dave's the man. That's why he's the director.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to it. Everybody see it. Let me go ahead and finish that outline with you. Praise for the church, chapter 1. Paul's work in Thessalonians, chapter 2. He's reviewing. Chapter 3, Timothy's visit after they were run out of town. Chapter 5, current issues. Chapter 4. Chapter 4, current issues. And that's where we're going to get into the day of the Lord and the loved ones dying, all that. So chapter 4, current issues. Chapter 5 is preparation for Jesus. Preparation for his return. 1 Thessalonians 5. I'll probably come up with a more succinct outline, but that one's a good content outline for just to cover what's there. And while we're doing outline, I'll go ahead and give you the two sections to the book. Most of Paul's epistles divide into two sections. Most of the time, it's going to be doctrine in the first part of the book, practical in the second part of the book. But in Thessalonians, it's a little different. Chapters 1 through 3 is personal, and chapters 4 and 5 are hortatory. Anybody recognize the word hortatory? Not a word we use very much. It means exhortation. So he's exhorting them in the last two chapters to faithfulness, not to give up, not to be discouraged. So hortatory is chapters 4 and 5. Now I'm going to back all the way up and start where we did this morning, just to go in a more logical order. I usually cover that a little bit later in the introduction, but that's okay to go ahead and do it. Now I want to go back and do the more technical stuff. We started with a timeline of Paul's missionary journey, and we saw where Thessalonica fits into that. Acts 17, we covered Acts 17, the details of his first visit there, teaching, success, then persecution. All right. Now we want to move into the occasion of the letter, second missionary journey. If you think about the missionary journeys of Paul, the first one lasted 2 years, the second one lasted 3 years, the third one lasted 4 years, and the first one covered 1,200 miles, second one 2,400 miles, third one, let's go ahead and get it right. I've got that written down over here, so I'll give it to you. Acts 13. So missionary journeys of Paul covered in Acts chapters 13 through 28. They lasted from AD 45 to 63. The first one is covered in Acts 13 and 14. 2 years, 1,235 miles. Second missionary journey, this is where we are in his preaching in Thessalonica. It's covered in chapter 15 through 1823. It lasted 3 years and covered 2,403 miles. Third missionary journey starts where that one ends, 1823, through the end of the book, because that's the one where he's a prisoner and he goes to Rome, and that lasted 2,515 miles over 4 years. So I think those are good statistics to commit to memory, at least to write in your Bible. And if you write them in your Bible and you memorize you need them. Like if I were preaching on this, I would have reviewed that ahead of time. I should have done it for class, but I forgot the 2,500, but everything else was accurate. So you might want to remember that. But I like those kind of details in a sermon or a class because they give most Bible students won't know those things. And so you want all of your students, if you're preaching something that a good Bible student knows about, they will know most of what you're going to say, but give them something that they leave this. I got something out of that. So that's what I try to do. So it's on Paul's second missionary journey. The Jews followed Paul and incited the locals. We read about that in Acts 17. Number 2, they were unable to find Paul to persecute him, so they detained Jason, forced him to pay a fine or give security. Pay a fine or give, as King James has, a security. Number 3, Paul was concerned they might fall away. So somewhere between Berea and Athens, so we'll go back up to our timeline, somewhere during this 141 miles of that journey, that's where we are. So it's pretty soon after he left Thessalonica. Somewhere between Berea and Athens, he sent Timothy back. So Timothy's traveled with him. He gets here and Paul's concerned. He said, Timothy, go back and check on this. Should have now that you can sneak back in. They won't, you're not as prominent as I am. You're a young man. You'll be able to come in hopefully unnoticed. Go check on them. And this is Timothy's first assignment, by the way. First assignment was to go back into Thessalonica after Paul had to flee and they stirred up the hornet's nest. So it's sort of a baptism by fire for Timothy. All right, the next part, number 4 on our list, is Timothy was young and a new Christian. This was his first assignment. I just said that. Then number 5, Paul became discouraged while in Athens, waiting for the response. Paul became discouraged in Athens while waiting for the response. Am I going too fast? Is this a good speed for you?
Yeah, you're fine.
Did you just take
This thing is a
camera
good
shots? Waiting for the response. All right, good. Let me know if you get behind, and I'll be happy to slow down. I can talk faster than you can walk, and I know that. So you just speak up. Number 6, he seems to have not heard from Timothy or Silas for 6 months to a year. So that was a long time. He really loved those Christians. He had to leave so suddenly, and he was anxious to hear from them. But in those days, you couldn't travel fast, and you didn't have any emails to send WhatsApp or, couldn't call. So the best thing to do was send a message by somebody else, but they had to get there, and then they had to find the person. So it was just not a good situation for communication. Now for number 7, 2 things encouraged Paul while he was in Corinth. So you see, he left Thessalonica, he went to Berea, then to Athens, and then to Corinth. So he sent Timothy back here, but he didn't hear anything all during this period. And he's waiting in Corinth. And finally, Timothy catches back up to him in Corinth with a message. And for the most part, it's a good message. So the last one on the occasion of the book, 2 things encouraged Paul in Corinth. One was a vision that the Lord, 18, 9, and 10. We haven't read 18 yet, but you're familiar with that. And that's what was just outside of Corinth. And then Timothy and Silas arrived with good news, Acts 18:5. So there's your occasion. This is the letter that he wrote after he heard back from Silas and Timothy.
Can you Can you make that just a little
No,
bit
it's
bigger so that it's all
Yes.
on one screen and I can take a picture of it, please?
Absolutely. How about right? Is that good?
That's perfect. That's perfect.
And while he's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and start on the date you see to the left of that. It was written from Corinth when Gallio was proconsul, because we find that out in Acts 18:12 to 17, which is a good thing because proconsuls only serve for 1 year, and we have a letter from Gallio, so we can identify the year. The Delphi inscription dates a letter to Gallio AD 52 from the emperor. So now we know what year Gallio served as proconsul. Therefore, we know what letter or what time Paul received the information from Paul Silas and sent the letter back. So maybe he wrote it in 52, it got there in 53, but maybe it got there in 52. Notice number 3 on that list, terms were usually 1 year beginning in July. So that helps us date the book. That also fits with Paul's missionary journeys. Started in AD 45 and ended in 63. So you have that fits within the time frame of the second missionary journey. Now let's talk about recipients next. Michael, you get a picture of everything there you needed?
Oh,
Or anybody else?
Am I that slow?
All right, we'll go ahead and get that picture, including the 58, the date, and then we'll move over and talk about the recipients. Talk about Thessalonica.
Okay.
There are still a lot of sites you can see in Thessalonica if you get to make that trip one day.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some really interesting things. All right, let's go to recipients. Thessalonica was a chief city and the capital of Macedonia. We mentioned earlier that this made it susceptible to the Jews' accusation of Paul and preaching another king, but it also really was a strategic location for the gospel to go, because it was an influential place and a lot of important people lived there. Number 2, first European country to receive the gospel. The first European country to receive the gospel was Macedonia. Now, the city was Philippi, but Philippi is in Macedonia. Let me show you that. I think we have. So you see the different colors on this map? So you have Macedonia up here in the far left northwest quadrant here. So there's Philippi. You notice Thessalonica is in the same color. They're all Berea, Apollonia, Neapolis. All these are in the same place. It's sort of like Warner Robins, Georgia. You know, Georgia would be equivalent to Macedonia, and then Philippi, Macon, Atlanta. Those would be the cities within that region, within that state. Then you notice down under that, the green country is Achaia. So that's where Paul is now. He's at Corinth. And he's been at Athens, and he's going to be at Cenchrea. And then he's going to leave from there and sail back over to Asia. So I just wanted you to get in your mind, you know, when he was crossing over and received the Macedonian call at Troas, you remember he wanted to go south and preach in Asia, but he was forbidden. He wanted to go to Bithynia to preach. He was forbidden. So he just kept going straight, and he ends up at the Aegean Sea, and that's when he gets the Macedonian call. So you sort of see the layout of the Roman Empire in this part of the world, and that helps to appreciate what we're studying here with the recipients. It was the largest city in the area. It was rebuilt in 315 BC. So it's an ancient city by Cassander. You probably remember Cassander, some of you, from studying Daniel or Ezekiel, especially Daniel, or the world empires. So you had Alexander after he died, his kingdom, his 4 generals fought over his kingdom from 323 to 301. But Cassandra eventually had this section, and he named it for his wife when he rebuilt it. It was originally called Therma, and it was known for its hot springs. It was granted free city status by Augustus, and I put down for a reference there Acts 17:6, which we read earlier. They did have a synagogue, and we saw that in Acts 17, and we noted it there, but you might put it in your notes here. It was on the Ignatian Way. Sometimes that's spelled with an E instead of an I. On the Ignatian Way, which was well traveled. So overland, I'll go back over to the map real quick. So overland, you had the Ignatian Way. So people traveling from Neapolis, Philippi, so on, and coming the other direction from Athens. So there was a path, and Thessalonica was on that path. But also, it was a port city, so it received traffic from the sea as well. So it was very strategically located to get traffic from both land and sea. Then the last one, it was a seaport on the Thermatic Gulf, and then it's modern day Greece. Modern day Greece. Seemed like we had a map of modern day over here too. So let me show you that. Yeah, so you see the lighter color on the screen. This is modern day Turkey, is where Paul left from, crossed the Aegean Sea, went into Greece, and there is still the city of Thessaloniki, spelled with a K today. And you notice Athens is also in Greece, and where Paul went eventually after he left Thessalonica. All right, let me give you this. For those of you who preach, you might want to, I like to give sermons, not to spend too long just giving the technical stuff. So if you wanted to relate their world to our world as far as the recipients, what was it like to live in Thessalonica? Well, it was a place that was intermixed as to race or as to demographics. There were Jews there, there were Greeks there, there were rich people there, there were poor people there. So you had a lot of different, it was a mixed city. And if I were preaching that, I would talk about, we live in a mixed world, don't we? People from all over the world have come to America. You know, now we're intermixed even with technology. Some of you are not even, we're not even in the same country as we're working together, certainly not in the same states. So we live in an intermixed world, like they did. Number two, it was a world of idolatry. And Paul mentions that in chapter 1, we'll see in verse 9, they had forsaken their idols to come to Christ. It was a city that was immoral. We'll bring that out more when we get to chapter 4, 3 and 4. Our bodies are not to be used for immorality, but for God. And then it was an intolerant city. They did not give the gospel a warm welcome. Acts 17, 5 through 10, which we saw at least the first part of that earlier. I think we actually read down through verse 10, and we saw that the Jews stirred up the people, but the Gentiles participated in that. So they were not an hospitable city. They were intolerant. And if I were preaching that, I might point out, all 4 of these things today are true. We talked about that one. What about idolatry? Well, in the worldwide, absolutely. More people idolatrous than not, most likely as to the religion. But also in the New Testament, it says that covetousness is idolatry. Colossians 3:5. So how many people do you know that love money? Probably a lot of people. And anything that we put ahead of God is an idol. So our hobbies can be an idol. Our job can be an idol. Our families can be an idol. There can be many different idols, and thus there are problem with idolatry in our world also. Then, is our world immoral? Yeah, we would have to say that it is. People live together without getting married. They don't really have any sexual ethics. Anything goes. Many people. There are those that will lie without any compunction of conscience. They'll cheat. They'll, so it's not hard to make that point. And then, is there any intolerance in our world? Yes, there is. It hasn't all been eradicated yet. So it'd be easy to preach, I think, those points in the introduction to make something, maybe at the end, if you were giving an introduction to the book of Thessalonians, First Thessalonians, you might say that to the end. And if you can get through all of this in a Bible class, then you might say, as we end today, let's make some practical points about this and give them something to take home that they can use. And I always think, even though it's important to cover the technical stuff, it's also helpful to give practical stuff. And sometimes you can work those kind of things in, when you're in the middle of some of this other, but at least have something that is, what about a guy who's never going to teach a Bible class? He's a construction worker, and he really doesn't need to know when the book was written or, these other things necessarily. He's not, the facts are not that important to him, but he really does need somebody to talk to him about being a moral person in an immoral society. Well, we'll get that, we'll work that in somewhere. All right, I'll just move across the page. Let's talk about the author. Yes, sir.
Brother Webster. And also for our kids, for intolerance, they have to deal with conflict resolution. How do you deal with conflict resolution with an intolerant group of people? Our society is leaning more and more towards that.
You're exactly right. So you talk about, how do you get along with people as a Christian? How do you not stand up for the wrong thing, but do stand up for the right thing? And I think that's important, to know what to let go and where to stand up. What points of justice are going to be helpful in me standing for the truth, but also the big picture of these people I'm influencing. I want them to obey the gospel. What's something I should teach now, and what's something that will be taught later. Right now I want to really build a rapport with them. I want to lay the groundwork of the deity of Christ, the authority of the Bible, those kind of things. And then some other things may need to wait a little till later. But we do need conflict resolution, because if you can't get along with people, then you can't convert them, can't influence them. Now let's go into the authorship. This book reveals a personal side of Paul. He got close to these people in a short amount of time, and he really about them because he didn't get to leave on his terms, and he really felt for them. But he also admired that they stayed faithful after so little grounding in the truth. That a lot of churches would have gone under with only 3 weeks of instruction and then being so intensely persecuted. But this church did not. So there's a lot to admire in this congregation. Under authorship, Paul established the church after leaving Philippi. We covered that. They're about 100 miles apart. Number 3, he was forced to leave prematurely. Acts 17:10. He mentions that in 1 Thessalonians 2:17. Paul had wanted to return to check on them, but Satan hindered him. He mentions that in 1 Thessalonians 2:18. So he sent Timothy back, Acts 17:14-16. We covered that a little earlier. Timothy caught up with Paul at Corinth. We mentioned that, 1 Thessalonians 3:6. And historically, that's at Acts 18:5. And the report was mostly good. Mostly good. He is going to correct some things when we get over to chapter 4, but that's to be expected. A Gentile church, a mixed church in a Roman city with coming out of paganism, you're just going to have to deal with some, further teaching things. And so morality is something Paul would deal with in 4:1-12. And also some misunderstandings about, like we said, the day of the Lord So there'll be some little things as we go through. But by and large, he was well pleased to get the report that he got. And there are several verses there that I won't give you point by point, but you can jot those down, showing that what he responds to is what the report was. So you can pick up on, even though we don't have Timothy's report, the letter or the talking points, we can figure it out. And what does Paul say? So we know that must be what the report was, because that's what he says. All right, let's talk about to the Jew first. Of course, Romans 1:15 through 17, Jew first, also to the Greek. So he went to the Jews first 3 Sabbath days, Acts 17:2 through 4, which we read. They had a knowledge of the Old Testament, which prepared them for the Messiah. I didn't write this in, but I will now. Galatians 3:6. It was a schoolmaster to lead us, or to lead the Jews to Christ. And that's why he would go to the Jews first. They're going to be farther along and easier to convert than a pagan, generally speaking. Number 2, their synagogues were ready made for preaching to religious people. They already show up at these assemblies every day. So whatever day you get to town, especially on Sabbath day, it's a bigger crowd, but there would be people there every day. So you'd have an opportunity to teach religious people. And Paul would go there immediately, for him to sort through where the people were who needed the gospel. Number 3, there was an expectation of the kingdom as the formerly chosen people. They were looking for the kingdom. They were looking for a Messiah. They had rejected him as a people, but they at least had the expectation of, talk to me about the Messiah. We want to know this. We want the kingdom to come. Then number 4, they were monotheistic, which was the opposite of Romans. Romans had a lot of gods. You're going to get in a ship to cross the ocean, you pray to one God. You get out of the ship to cross the land, you pray to a different, they had all kind of gods. And they had high morals generally. They were at least taught high morals. We see that they didn't always live up to that. These lewd fellows of a baser sort that they're consorting with, it shows that. But by and large, they were more moral than the Romans. And then the second part, to the Greek, when the Jews rejected the gospel, which they did, some believed, but for the most part, they rejected it. Paul turned to the Greeks, where he often had more success. The Gentiles were often sin sick and hungry for something better. If you can find a person who hits rock bottom, it's sad, but that person knows there's got to be a better way to live than the way I've been doing it. I know I don't have the best way. Talk to me about your Christianity. Talk to me about Jesus. I might be interested in that. We see that today, but certainly Paul found that among the Gentiles generally. All right, I'm going to move over now and give you, I gave you the outline of the book. I think before I give you the structure, though, I'll give you this information about the book itself. If you want it on one screen, I'll put it right there. And it's a little small because it's pretty wide, but you should be able to stretch it. And that way you won't have to take 2 pictures if you want it. And I think I can cover it here. Once I've given you a few minutes to take that picture, then I will enlarge it. The book is more practical than most of Paul's epistles. And we'll find a lot of practical things that you can easily preach or teach. Number 2, it was possibly Paul's first book. AD 52 is the date we gave it. And if Galatians was not written at this point, then Thessalonians is his first book. It could be Galatians. They were written close to the same time. So possibly the first book that Paul wrote. Some people date Galatians AD 48. And if so, then of course it predates it. But it was an early letter. And it is definitely the first letter to European European Christians. These Galatia, of course, was over in Asia. Now, the key verses to the book of 1 Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians 1, 9 and 10, 1 Thessalonians 3, 12 and 13, 1 Thessalonians 1, 9 and 10, 1 Thessalonians 3, 12 and 13. The key words to the book, we have 3. Lord, let me show you a layout of, when we get to the chapter, we're going to have 3 different screens. I think we did that in a previous class because there's so many notes here. It gets really, well, that's the way it looked. The chapter 2 is the way it looked before I started cleaning it up. You see, that's sort of hard to figure out. But this is the worst screen. It's not as bad once you enlarge it. So those are the commentary notes. And then we also will have sermons. And that's pretty clean now, too. All those are sermons that we'll get in chapter 1. We'll probably think of some more, too. But this is the cleanest screen. It is called the highlight screen. And that's where we mark the key words in the book. And we're not doing this yet. I'll give it to you later. But I just wanted to show you Lord, how often Lord is used. You see the bright green color there on your screen? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in the first chapter. So every other verse has Lord in it. So that's one of the key words of the book. All right, let's go back over. See the other key words. Hope. Lord is used 25 times. Hope is found 4 times, which is not a lot. You know, there may be other words that use more, but this is a key concept in the book. So it does make the list for key words. And then the third one is brethren. I should have showed you that when I was over there, but that's okay. We'll mark it in a light blue color as we go through. You can choose your own color scheme, but that if you go with mine, then it's in light blue. All right, now let's move into the theme of the book. I'm sort of all over the map on the theme. There's so much here. I think what I'll do though, I'm going to pull this out and put it in its own, it has its own category later. So I'll just save this and discuss it with you down here. Oh yeah, that's not good.
Brother Webster, so we look at love of the Lord, hope, and brethren, but love is applied all through the book.
Yes, it is. Really, Christianity is just the application of love, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, we love God, we love our neighbor. That's the summation of the entire gospel. So, of course, you would expect the book to be, and to have a lot more about love than just the verses that use love. The word love. So I think we'll see that. If you see that as we go through, feel free to bring that out, because I may not think of it at the right times, but that's absolutely true. All right, back to the book. Cleaning this up as we go. So back to the book. The place of writing we mentioned already was Corinth, where Timothy and Silas rejoined Paul, and that's in Acts 18, 5, 11, and 18. I'm right here on your screen. And brought him both news and supplies. We hadn't mentioned the supplies earlier, but those are your verses for supporting the arrival of his friends when he was in Corinth. 1 Thessalonians 3:6, 1 Corinthians 11:9, Philippians 4:15, and Acts 18:3. Time of writing, we mentioned earlier, AD 52. This is a little more precise. Perhaps it was winter of AD 51-52, which would have been earlier in the year, or it could have been autumn of 52. So I'm going to put that up here with date, just making it a little simpler. every time you teach a book, it gets a little better, or at least it should. When you're an old preacher, remember this, I'm about to tell you. I read this somewhere. I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson that said this, but you could Google it to confirm that. But somebody asked how he continued to be so in demand as an old man when other men tended to be put out to pasture, and he said, I'm like the apple tree. I grow a little new wood every year. A tree adds another ring every year. A tree adds, to be fruitful, you have to keep studying. The reason people get put out to pasture, well, it may be their mind is not, as strong, and therefore they can't do what they used to do. But a lot of times it's just they rest on their laurels. They just re-preach their sermons over and over, and they think they're fine, but they're not really fresh anymore. So don't do that. So anyway, that's what I'm doing every time I teach a book. I try to make it fresh again by studying and learning some new things, mix the new things with the old things, and it keeps it exciting to me, which will make it exciting, I hope, to the students. All right, so your place of writing we covered, and then we cover the time. Let's go into the value of the book. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to the theme since I mentioned that. We'll come back. We'll come back to the value. Let's keep it logical. So themes of the book, if you wanted to talk about the major themes of the book, then there would be, you could pick one of two. Either the second coming of Christ or be holy till Jesus comes. Be holy till Jesus comes. And both of those, of course, are similar. One is a little simpler. But that's, I guess, the end of our class here. I've got away from us today. Let me finish. Discussion, and then I'll save the rest of it. We'll start. Hopefully, we'll be able to cover more next time. We won't have the technical. I'll get started setting up earlier, and hopefully we'll get ahead of that. So I need to cover themes with you. Those are more minor themes, and then I'll want to cover with you the value and the purposes of the book. Mm-hmm. And then we'll get into the structure. So we have on Wednesday, we'll do this introduction pretty quickly, and then we'll get into chapter 1. So just be prepared. I'd like for you to read the chapter that we're going to be covering before class every time. And believe that you'll find, if this is not a regular habit, that every time you read the chapter, you'll learn something. You can read it 20 times and see something the 20th time you did 19 times. The Bible is amazing. So we'll try to do that, and I'll try to do that also ahead of time in preparation to read through the chapter, so it'll be fresh on our minds. Anybody have anything to say? And I'll let you get your lunch.
Yes,
no, sir.
It's hard to compete with lunch, so Veronica, and then
okay. Yes, sorry. I'm sorry. Can you
Michael, then Veronica. Veronica, you go ahead.
Can you please expand? You had taken away, I think it was the time of writing, and put it under next to the number 1, I think. Is that correct? Did you put time of writing up there? Did you move it from? Okay, yeah, you moved it from.
Yeah, I moved it because
okay,
I had split this out. I split part of it out. So if you want to take another picture now, let me put those two on the screen together, and you can get all of this now.
Okay, great. Better. Thank you. All right. Okay, that was all.
Michael, what'd you have?
Okay. No, I as always, Brother Webster, you always do an outstanding job. I thought about when I look at this book, I always teach it with chapter 1 being the chapter of victory, and then Paul expresses his love for them and the rest, because it's a pattern for the early church that we can be victorious in the gospel. So I don't see any writing close. And,
Which
correct
which
me if I'm
verse
wrong.
which verse do you tie that? Michael, what verse do you tie victory to? I just want to put it in my notes in chapter
Oh, one. Yeah, chapter
maybe
1.
down about verse 9, probably.
Yeah, 9. That the conversion that they turned them from idolatries into serving the living God. That's just like it's so powerful. It's and you think
Yeah, I tell
about
you
the
what, I already
completeness.
got a sermon there, but I didn't have a title for it. So you just gave me my title for that. So I'm gonna do that. How about victory in Jesus or victory of the gospel?
Yes, sir.
I don't have enough room for more than 3 words. So I'm going with victory in Jesus. And then we'll mark that in, let's see, what color do we want? How about light blue this time? All right. You're dismissed if you need to go. If you want to ask anything or stick around, you're welcome to also. I realize the value of your time, so I appreciate you taking the class. Appreciate having you. Look forward to getting to know you a little better. The new ones. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have anything? You're welcome. I'm excited to be teaching this. Looking forward to it. Anybody else have anything you want to add or question? Something we'll cover it. We'll cover a lot next time. So this class meets again on Wednesday morning at 8 my time, 8 to 11 or 9 to 12 if you're on Eastern time. It only meets twice a week. So we'll hopefully we'll be well into chapter 1 by the end of class, and then we'll probably finish up chapter 1 a week from today. We'll see. The pace on this, I'm not sure because I've added a good bit. So we'll just we'll go. We'll be deliberate, but we won't be just slow. We got a lot to cover. By the time you get all 8 chapters, we'll probably run out of time, even though it's only 8 chapters. So,
will we be able to go over our the assignment you gave us? Because I do have a question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I meant to give you a little time to do that, and then we have the technical issues. But I tell you what, if you'll remind me on Wednesday, you want to share some of that, and I do want you to save that list also for. Let's say you had a question in chapter 2, then when we get to chapter 2, bring it up and we'll deal with it at that point.
Okay.
Or, but I would like to hear just for interest's sake, what did you see when you read through the book? I mean, Samuel mentioned day of the Lord, but we didn't give anybody else time to really get into it. So we'll do that. Remind me on Wednesday, and we'll do a little bit of that. And then we'll do it all throughout the class.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I guess we're done. We'll see you. I'm going to go find a salad. Yeah, absolutely. Who did you say?
Anybody.
I'll do it. How about that? I'll do it. Let's pray together. Holy Father, we're grateful for the time that we've had to open thy word, and we're so thankful to have this many students interested in studying from the Thessalonian epistles. Help us to learn the things that would help us to be more like thy Son, to be prepared for his coming. Help us to have wisdom and courage to share these things with our congregations and also with the lost. We thank thee, Father, for our minds. We thank thee for our hearts, and help them to be open to truth. Forgive us of our sins. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right.
Thank you, Mr.
All right,
Allen.
enjoyed it. You're welcome.
You.
We'll see you Wednesday.
Thank you, Brother Al.
You're very welcome. Good to have you in class.
Now, Brother Allen, got a quick question for you.